how this $28 book made me $66,000. Now, to be exact, it was $66,707.81. Now, I'm not trying to sell you this book, but I do need to thank a huge part of my profits to it. It cost me $28 and it's made me tens of thousands. And to be honest, I've never given it the credit it deserves. Now you might be wondering, what is the book? Let me get straight into it. So the book is called Quantitative Momentum, a Practitioner's Guide to Building a Momentum-Based Stock Selection System. It was created by 2 PhDs, and to back up my claim in the title, here's kind of proof from Hyperliquid, which is a decentralized exchange where you can trade perpetual futures on crypto, and that's where I ran a momentum strategy using similar principles from this book. Now, originally, I stumbled across it when I was searching for ways to improve my trading, and it has since then made me over $66,000 from using what I learned and adapted from the book. When I finished reading this book, though, it completely opened my eyes to one key thing. It introduced me to systematic momentum trading. But before this book, I was like most people. I was cluelessly following others, looking for perfect indicators or a way to see where the market will go guaranteed. I was simply, though, gambling with more steps and not actually trading. I had no edge, I had no process, I had no system. Just hope and some pattern recognition that didn't really exist. Now, to save you from reading the full 200 pages, as well as that cheeky $28, I'm going to give you 4 key takeaways that might transform your trading too. So let's get into the first takeaway. Why momentum actually works and why doesn't it disappear? This is primarily because momentum works because it's painful. And this was a key thing the book hammers on in kind of the introductory factors. Most people think momentum is just too simple to work, right? Just buy what's going up and that can't make money. That's way too easy. But here's what the book reveals. Momentum strategies deliver long-term outperformance precisely because they fail spectacularly at times. There are periods where momentum gets absolutely destroyed, quarters where you maybe underperform by 10 to 30%, months where everything you bought crashes simultaneously, and this creates what's called career risk. Career risk is a risk that prevents professional money managers from fully exploiting momentum. Think about it like this. If you're a fund manager and you're managing 50 billion, you implement a momentum strategy and you only do a momentum strategy. For 3 years, you maybe outperform. You do really well, the market's nice and ripping up higher. But then one quarter, you underperform by 25% or you take a very rough drawdown. Your clients are going to panic, they're probably going to pull their money, and you'll most likely get fired. Even though the long-term data says momentum works, even though you could have recovered it maybe in a year or two, even though the strategy is fundamentally sound, you're out of a job. That pain creates opportunity. And most retail traders as well quit right after their first drawdown with any sort of momentum strategy. That's why momentum hasn't been fully arbitraged away. As they kind of presented in one of their presentations, no pain, no gain. And I think that's very similar for most edges or even premiums in trading. And momentum is kind of more classified as a premium nowadays. Now, the book also highlights 2 main reasons momentum opportunities remain. One is behavioral bias persists. Investors continue to underreact to positive news, they anchor to old prices, and they're slow to update those beliefs. 2 is short-sighted investors that chase performance. When a stock rallies 50%, all the retail piles in, thinking they're going to get the next 50% or 100% move because they're looking for that lottery ticket. And that attention bias really never disappears. These aren't arbitrage opportunities that disappear when discovered. They're human nature, and that's why the edge has been so sustainable over such a long time horizon. As the book states, momentum works because most people can't handle the pain required to actually capture those returns. That's also why in a lot of videos I talk about something called a risk premium. It's a premium you're getting for taking on risk that others don't necessarily want to take on. Now, the second main takeaway is the frog in the pan algorithm. As the book goes over, not all momentum is created equally though. The book introduces something called the FIP algorithm, or the frog in the pan. First, let's break down the problem with traditional momentum. Traditional momentum is, let's say, stock A is up 50% over 12 months, and stock B is also up 50% over 12 months. Traditional momentum says they're equal, buy both, but they may not actually be equal. Let's say stock A got there smoothly. It had consistent daily gains, gradual price appreciation, and slow diffusion of positive information. So, for the most part, we could see just a kind of gradual line up, right? But stock B got there with spikes. Let's say it had a huge single day jump, maybe 30% in a single day, and then mostly flat the rest of the time with explosive moves. So let's say the stock looked like this. It was kind of just, maybe even going down a bit, then huge spike, then it kind of trailed down. Maybe it's just got back to break even and then huge spike. Which one do you think performs better going forward? Well, normally stock A, the smoother one, is going to massively outperform. While stock B, normally because of mean reversion mechanisms, that's normally going to crash back down at least a bit. So this is what the FIP algorithm tries to capture. The more negative the FIP, the better. Why? Negative FIP means more positive days than negative days, and it's smoother overall momentum. This means that the stock went up gradually, consistently, and investors are slowly incorporating that good news in. This is more likely to be sustainable momentum, whereas more positive FIP means there's more negative days than positive days, which means there's more jumpy momentum to get to that percentage. This means the stock has made, big spikes on a few days, and this can create unsustainable momentum that reverses ultimately. Now, I didn't copy their exact method, but the key thing this book taught me was that momentum quality matters. For example, in crypto, I adapted this by measuring daily volatility relative to total return and making sure to be more selective about what momentum, instruments or tickers I'm going to be actually participating on and for my own algos to trade. Now, number 3 is concentration beats diversification, and more specifically in momentum. This is normally something people get wrong. As you can kind of see via this graph, there's higher concentration, right? So this is a graph with amount of stocks. So you can see 50 has a higher percent return than if you had 500 stocks, for example, that you're viewing for momentum. Now, the book originally recommends around 50 stocks with the highest quality momentum, not 500 stocks. Ideally, you want 50 concentrated positions with very strong high quality momentum. Now, why does this work? Because momentum is a power law distribution. It means 10% of momentum stocks generate about 80% of the returns. The top 50 is going to capture that highest amount of edge, while the bottom 450 momentum stocks are normally going to dilute your performance. Now, what you'll normally find, and it's the same thing with the book's research, is that by doing this, you are going to get higher returns, but you are also going to have higher volatility. And you're going to have to probably have higher conviction, meaning you're going to have to go through slightly steeper drawdowns. Now, this ultimately is up to you whether you want to pay that trade, but as all things in trading, there's always a con, there's always a payoff for whatever you're doing most of the time. Now, my implementation of this in crypto led to huge profits when momentum was very high in crypto. And this was because ultimately, while you can see there's a lot of positions, it's not, trading 200 tokens at once. Most of the time, I'm normally focusing on the top 20 to top 100 with the best momentum scores. This concentration approach in crypto has delivered exceptional results for me. But as mentioned just before, there's more volatility. So you have to keep that in mind. And if you're building a portfolio, maybe this is just one thing to keep in mind. And the reason this did even better is that crypto has even more extreme power law dynamics than equities. That primarily just means you have higher volatility in crypto and the top movers massively outperform everything else. If I was trading, 500, that's going to increase transaction costs, which is going to be something you want to be prevalent and understanding about. Now, as I said, you can all have very pretty P&Ls, especially going through good times of momentum, but there are going to be quarters where you're down maybe, 10, 15%, 20%, depending on how much volatility you're taking on. But over the long term, concentration and quality matters more than just trading a ton of tickers for momentum. Now, number 4 is rebalancing strategy matters way more than you think. And it's actually saved me thousands in transaction costs. So how and when should you rebalance? Because that can dramatically affect returns. Most traders don't really think about this. They just rebalance whenever or maybe on a fixed calendar schedule. So the book introduces 2 main approaches. You've got calendar rebalancing. So this is on fixed dates. So this could be daily, monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever it is, right? Now, the pros to this is it's very simple, it's systematic, and it's very predictable. The cons, though, is you're forcing trading even when unnecessary. So the second version tries to fix this. The second version is primarily that you only rebalance when there's positions that deviate by X% from your target. This ultimately reduces unnecessary trades, which lowers costs. The cons, though, is this is more complex to implement and it requires constant monitoring. The reason why this is so important is every trade costs you money. You have commissions, you have slippage, you have spread, and you even have market impact if you're trading something that's less liquid. So my implementation is normally a hybrid approach where I have base rebalancing, which is a threshold base that depends on the strategy. It could be every day, it could be every month, etc. But then there's also basically an override that if a position drifts X% from the target, then you can rebalance either right away or you can rebalance just on the next fixed time period. But this means you don't always have to rebalance on a fixed time period. You can check every day, for example, and then if it deviates enough on that day, then you could rebalance. The lesson here really is don't blindly rebalance on a calendar. Think about transaction costs, market seasonality, position drift thresholds, and smart rebalancing can add 2 to 3% to your annual returns. Obviously, it could be more if you're trading more volatility, but it's something to really consider. Now, before you click away, I did actually want to give you one more bonus one from the book, and that's about absolute versus relative momentum. So absolute means time series primarily. So if a stock is up over the past 12 months, it's a yes. For example, you're buying it if you're just doing standard momentum. If no, then you're staying flat or you're maybe even shorting if it's downward momentum. Overall, you're comparing the asset to itself over that time. You're not comparing it to anything else. Whereas you have relative momentum, which is often referred to as well as cross-sectional, where you look for which stocks are performing best relative to each other. So you're buying the top performers over that time and you're shorting the bottom performers. So primarily you're comparing assets to each other. So what that kind of looks like, right, is you would have different stocks here. You want to look at the top top 33% and the bottom 33%, and you're ignoring everything in the middle, those percentages and amounts can change, right? It depends on what you're looking at. But primarily you're trying to long the top performers and you're trying to short the bottom performers. Now, why is this so powerful? It's because it can become a market neutral when implemented long and short. So during crashes, for example, you're going to be long strong stocks or strong tickers, for example, which are going to often decline less, while you're still shorting the weak stocks, which are going to decline even more. So most of the time you can profit even in down markets and from that spread. My implementation, actually, this in crypto, we employ this exact approach in the crypto momentum group, where we teach traders how to get an algo live and running. This cross-sectional approach has worked amazingly well in crypto, especially recently with more of the downward moves. Additionally, it works very well because crypto has extreme relative strength dynamics. Winners often keep winning and losers keep on losing. And also you can build that market neutral construction, which smooths out returns even when BTC is crashing, for example. So often you can have a very low correlation to BTC, which is great when building a portfolio. I actually have a full video on this. It's called I Built a Hedge Fund Strategy That Survived a Crypto Crash, I think, where I break down cross-sectional momentum in detail. So link in the description if you want to check that out, or if you want to check out the group.